Okay, we're live. Okay, we are episode 80. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a really late night edition of Security on the In30 network. This is episode 80, and we should actually be recording this in about 3 hours, but I don't know. It's midnight somewhere in the world, just not on the East Coast. But either way, the Patriot Act, is about to expire. And there's a whole litany of bills on the agenda that Tom somehow figured all out and is going to go explain to us.
Figured it all out is giving me a lot of credit. I think I sort of almost deciphered kind of what's happening. And unfortunately, it's not the entire Patriot Act that expires here in a couple hours. It's just a couple pieces of it. Good pieces, good things that should happen, but it's not the full win that we were all hoping for.
Well, I mean, so if you don't remember, you're too young, whatever it is. Okay, the Patriot Act. So after 9/11, the Patriot Act went into effect because we told Congress we never, ever want 9/11 to happen again. Do whatever you need to do to make sure that happens. And Michael Moore did a movie about it, whether you like him or hate him. And basically, we found out all these weird provisions in there that we just let Congress agree to, and they've been exploiting. And we really came to the forefront last year when Snowden leaked everything.
Right. Yeah, none of this debate would have happened. None of the fight over privacy would have happened at all. And I know we probably wouldn't have started this podcast if it hadn't been for Edward Snowden coming forward and saying, hey, this is all the crazy stuff that is being done in your name because you told Congress it was okay.
And I mean, one of the things I remember heavily after 9/11 when the Patriot Act was going there was the issue of national ID cards. And I was always against national ID cards, even when everyone's saying, why? What's the problem? You already have a driver's license, this and that. And I said, no, driver's license just allows you to drive. Why do you want everyone to always ask you for your national ID card? That's just a violation of some sort of privacy. And this is, I mean, way back when I was 20 years old. So thinking about it then compared to now is a great reason. Well, we didn't have it then. We definitely shouldn't have it now. And even looking at more of the Patriot Act, we shouldn't even have most of those provisions.
Right. And so the Patriot Act, for those who aren't familiar, and I'm trying not to sound alarmist, it's really hard when it comes to the Patriot Act, though. It basically gives Congress and intelligence agencies blanket access to just about anything they want to, any sort of information or wiretap or warrantless surveillance for anyone, kind of, sort of, except for U.S. citizens, unless they're connected to terrorism or a foreign nation in some way, which, by the way, most everyone is, so most everyone is under surveillance. Even Clapper, who has said in Congress, yeah, Americans fall through the cracks, and it's not really an uncommon occurrence. It gives Congress the authority it gives intelligence agencies the authority to scoop up any and all data from anything and everything attached to a suspect's name for just about any reason relating to terrorism or protecting America. In essence, the bill doesn't actually do anything. It's hard to sift through the data. It hasn't actually stopped any terrorist attacks. It's just kind of dragnet Orwellian surveillance and very much 1984-esque, Big Brother type data collection. It's really dangerous.
Well, I've also heard that it hasn't stopped any terrorist attacks, but I've also heard that the Secret Service, the FBI, all the three-letter agencies don't want to actually admit whether it stopped any terrorist attacks. Basically, if you ask, they just don't respond. And I don't know if that means that it's actually stopped or they just won't respond to the number of how many.
Yeah, it would be so let's say a terrorist attack has been stopped by one of these programs, one of these dragnet surveillance programs. What's the harm in saying, yeah, hey, we caught this dude. He was going to blow up this building or this airplane or kill a bunch of people in this area. And because of this, because we got his phone records and his emails, and we could see what he was doing on Twitter, and we got his instant messages, and we connected all these dots, and then we apprehended him, and we stopped the terrorist, and America wins. What's the harm in saying that? What's the harm in championing your win? Right, unless there's an ongoing investigation, which, look, this thing has been in motion since what, 2006?
Well, it sounds like, that sounds great, but I look at it this way. Well, they catch the person and they say, yeah, we used this, and then all the ACLU, all the privacy advocacy groups will say, hey, wait a second, he's an American, you violated his rights to find it. Yeah, you caught him. And I think that's maybe the reason why they don't want to say that they're surveilling any Americans. So maybe, again, it makes no sense to me. I agree with you. I don't think they stopped anybody.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to play devil's advocate on this. I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. I don't think people that work at the NSA or the FBI or any of these intelligence agencies, Department of Homeland Security, etc., I don't think they hate Americans. I don't think they set out in their day job to say, we're going to spy on everyone and take everyone's information, and I'll finally get back at that jerk who, beat me up in school and took my lunch money. I don't think that's what they're doing. I honestly think the people who work in these departments really want to protect the country under any and all circumstances. They want to do anything and everything in their power, legal or not, to make sure 9/11 or something similar doesn't ever happen again. And you know what? It's a good motive. But horrible things happen even with the best of intentions. And the Patriot Act is the perfect realization of that adage.
Remember the story that happened 2 weeks ago. Some lady down in Texas somewhere had a Mohammed portrait gallery, which caused two I guess Islamic men to drive from Phoenix, Arizona, and basically opened fire. Now you had a really great security guard who was able to, who was an amazing shot, kill them both. But the FBI said, hey, they just went on our watch list. So they said, hey, we're watching these people, but the problem is they didn't stop them. It was, right, we're watching, because if we watched everybody, which they're doing, like, I don't want to say people will fall through the cracks, but what is a motive that we have to say? What is pre-crime, basically? What do we have to say, hold on, wait a second, until it either happens or right after it happens?
I was watching kind of the debate in Congress tonight on C-SPAN, which, by the way, they've got a streaming website and it works really well. So I watched the FCC coverage when they did the net neutrality thing, and I was watching tonight as they debated the U.S. Freedom Act. So check that out if you're so inclined to watch congressmen yell at each other. Anyway, Yemen came up a lot. So if I call someone in Yemen and I'm talking to someone in Yemen a whole lot, I go on a list, right? At what point do my rights as an American trump national security? At what point does Tom Cruise burst in my door and say, you are guilty of pre-crime talking to a dude in Yemen for about 6 hours last night, right? When does that happen? When does it make sense to actually follow up on something? How do you stop something that hasn't happened yet? And what are the ethics of that?
Well, I mean, you're right. And you don't know, look, you don't know what, and they're saying Yemen, we don't know what other country. And it's shown that every country is on some list.
Right.
For different things. Yeah,
and then there's the whole thing of, well, the NSA is not allowed to spy on U.S. citizens, but the UK is, because we don't have jurisdiction over there. So if GCHQ spies on Americans and the NSA spies on the people in the UK, they could just trade information because they're not breaking any laws at that point. And there's a lot of shady stuff that happens in the background there. But one of the big things we wanted to get across is tonight at midnight, there's a couple provisions of the Patriot Act that are going to expire, which is a huge win. The first one, and possibly the most well-known piece of the Patriot Act, Section 215, which gives intelligence agencies the ability to monitor phone metadata, not the contents of your phone calls. They're not listening to you talk to your grandmother, but they can see that on this day at this time, you talked to your grandmother for this long. Now, some people say, well, that's not a lot of data. They can't really trace anything with that. But actually, you can get a whole lot of information from just metadata. Metadata is the most important component of any surveillance system, on any system where you're trying to make a picture happen, right? Where you're trying to put together puzzle pieces. You don't care about the contents of the email or the contents of the phone call. You just care who's talking to who for how long and why, right? If person A calls person B, but right after that call, person B calls C and D, right? And then something happens, you can actually make a giant mesh network and eventually connect everyone to terrorism. It's a really nasty game of telephone that they're playing, and you can really implicate a lot of people by making a story where just about nothing is.
Well, look, we talked about metadata way back when. We talked about exactly this and how, and then the license plate reader story about a month and a half ago,
Yep.
where nobody cares about the data on a piece of paper. If I show you 1,000 pages of metadata, you can say, yeah, okay, fine, whatever, like the blockchain of a Bitcoin transaction. But if someone were to go and take this and map it out and do everything, then it becomes a little more personal, a little more, and a lot more scary, where you can say, wait, they know, they can figure out who mom, who dad, who are the important people in my life, and do this huge, graphically beautiful looking thing in a matter of hours, not even.
Right. They can, it's not about a single person's data. And you especially see this in big data companies and companies that, marketing firms that take a whole bunch of data, advertising firms, and they make giant graphs of this person's interested in this, so they're probably interested in this, and they probably fall into this demographic, which is also interested in these things, have this type of lifestyle, and have this sort of income. And the NSA is really no different than a big data marketing firm. They're going to take all the information they can, make a giant map, and that's where the real picture comes into play. It's not, was Tom talking to his grandmother last night? Is who is Tom and, 100 other people talking to around each other? Then they can see kind of your social graph, your map, and really where you're going, who you're hanging out with, all this stuff. There's a lot of conclusions that can be drawn from metadata.
You can, and I don't have any examples right now, but everywhere I read when they talk about this big things, find a book, find a movie on it. Like, for example, supermarkets. Supermarkets know everything about you.
Yes.
And it's really scary how much they know and how they use it to stay in business and be competitive and everything else. And that's where you're voluntarily giving information. Right. You're giving them your scan card and everything else. And they know that. Target knows that. We heard the story. Target knows when you're pregnant before you may know that you're pregnant. And that, again, that's voluntary. That's voluntary. That's when you sign the EULAs.
Right.
And here we go with the government taking this information non-voluntary. That you basically said yes, take it, without you really saying yes.
Yeah.
And take everything.
Keep in mind, I mean, we don't get an NSA Kroger Plus card, right? We're not getting fuel points every time the NSA raids our Gmail for metadata, right? We don't get discounts on government services or a discount on our taxes. No, what happens is they just take this wholesale because they can, because they have the ability, because they have tapped every ISP around. And trust me, they have tapped every ISP around. In ISPs, it doesn't matter how big or how small, they've got servers in the room passing data through, not just the NSA, but other government agencies trying to find things. And a lot of this is done under the guise of the Patriot Act.
So we're talking about Section 215. We're talking about the bulk collection of metadata from the cell phone, from phones and everything else.
Right.
And it sounds like nobody wants this, but turns out there's a lot of people that do.
Well, not necessarily, at least not the people who care enough to call into C-SPAN. One thing that I found really interesting, and again, this is a very small sampling, right? No one watches C-SPAN. It's probably the dullest channel on your TV. I don't know if the Tree channel actually exists, but it's probably got way more action than C-SPAN does on a regular basis. You can fall asleep to C-SPAN most of the time.
Unless, and I'm going to interrupt, and this is kind of funny. If you actually want some humor and some lively debate, find the Prime Minister's question. If you've ever seen the House of Parliament, C-SPAN runs in Britain, the Prime Minister's questions. You see the British Parliament, they go at it left and right. It's a train wreck.
Yeah, British politics are pretty fun to watch. They had a quorum call, and there was some time between debates, between people yelling at each other and making their case, and they decided to take some listener questions, and they've got a Republican line, a Democrat line, and an independent line, and people can just call in and voice their concerns. What really surprised me is I don't know if I heard of anyone on there that advocated for the Patriot Act, that said, hey, we need this to protect ourselves. Democrats were saying, wow, this is a terrible idea. Why on earth did I, vote for Obama twice? He promised he would be hard on surveillance and hard on the NSA, and he would turn over the Patriot Act, and he's completely flip-flopped, and I kind of feel cheated. And then you had Republicans on the other side saying, this dragnet surveillance is just big government. It's really expensive big government. And by the way, we're against both of those things, being Republicans. And then you have independents in the middle saying, I never asked for any of this. Why are we being surveilled? Why are we being spied upon for a government? It obviously doesn't protect us. It obviously doesn't do anything good. Why are we still doing this? And I didn't hear one person, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't hear one person call into C-SPAN tonight that said, yes, I am for the Patriot Act. I am for statewide surveillance. So I honestly, except for the senators, I don't know of anyone who's actually any American citizen who's in favor of the Patriot Act and in favor of spying.
Well, the problem is the U.S. citizens don't vote yes or no. It's their elected officials, and like you said, I think the majority of them are not. But there's a few people, a few big names that are for it, which may end up swaying the crowd, which makes it really scary.
Right.
I mean, Mitch McConnell is the big outspoken one.
I know McCain is in favor of it. I know. And I just lost his name. Ran for election last year and lost. Cannot believe I forgot his name.
Not Romney.
Yeah, Romney.
He's for.
He is pro Patriot Act.
I mean, I would see that wartime people want intelligence. And the military, the politicians who are in favor of the military, which is basically a lot of Republicans, do want it. The problem is that, and they say, hey, look, we're not doing anything wrong. This is helping us out. All this other stuff, but it's hard to justify when we're looking in Yemen, we're looking at ISIS, we're looking here, we're looking stateside, and we're seeing all these things. We're catching people, but we're catching them using normal police work. We're not using bulk metadata. So it's hard to say, yes, we don't want any surveillance and then expect it when we're out and about. Where'd my wallet go? Why can't you turn on the cameras? Why can't you surveil for me but not for anyone else?
So yeah, the thing that has stopped terrorist attacks and people with bombs in their underwear or shoes or carrying them down a New York sidewalk, the thing that has stopped those people, good old-fashioned police work, good old-fashioned, guys on the street, detectives watching stuff with warrants and, using our justice system the way it's supposed to be used. We've caught those people, and it's not because of, the super hackers and the NSA is saying, oh, people shouldn't have encryption, and by the way, we want to read all of your email. It's not those guys who are winning the battle, right? It's the cops. It's the people on the street. And
the police on the street don't have access to any of this metadata.
They don't.
I mean, it's kind of we have the data and we don't even want to share it. I mean, I hear that the NSA doesn't want to share with the CIA and the FBI, and so now all the agencies are creating their own way to collect surveillance.
Right.
And so now they all have it. So
yeah, this is one of the reasons that police forces around the country are investing in license plate scanners, right? They want to have big data of their own. Now, whether or not that's ethical is yet to be seen and yet to be tested in court. But it'll be interesting going forward. But in addition to Section 215 expiring tonight, and again, it's probably not going to be permanent. It'll probably be brought back in some form or another. The other things that have died with this are the lone wolf provisions and the roving wiretap provisions. Now, lone wolf, and I apologize. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a politician, and I do not do this for my day job. So I'm going to try to explain this the best I can. So as far as I understand it, lone wolf basically says we can watch someone who isn't a U.S. citizen, but they're not directly affiliated with a terrorist group because we think they might be a lone wolf terrorist. We think they might commit an act of terror, even if they're not really part of a terrorist group. So this kills that. And again, I could be totally off base. I'm getting these links from the EFF. So do your reading, do your own research, and don't only rely on one source, even us, especially us, to get your news. And then the other thing that is expiring is the roving wiretap provision. Now, this is huge. And I didn't know of this before the EFF pointed it out to me. Roving wiretap in the Patriot Act, this is Section 206, says that if the FBI wanted to, they could obtain one search warrant and call it a roving warrant, call it a roving search warrant. And any place you've been, any vehicle you've touched, any system you've touched, any electronic you've touched within a year, any line of communication you have used within a year is open to the wiretap. So they get one piece of paper that allows them to dive into your life entirely. Now, how this is different is the way it usually works in law enforcement is to get a warrant. You can't just say, hey, we want to just go after this guy. We want a warrant for that guy. A judge says, no, way too broad. You cannot do that. No, what warrants do, warrants have to be very specific. You have to say, hey, we have a suspect. We suspect him of this crime. We need to go to this address, this apartment number, search these things for this evidence on this date between these hours. And the warrant is only good in that limited scope. And the reason this is important is if a cop or a detective or someone else decides to go outside of the warrant, let's say the warrant doesn't include your car, but they search your car anyway, and they find a murder weapon in the glove box, your attorney can say, hey, this evidence was collected illegally because it's not in the warrant, and they can get you off of the crime. They can get you off the hook that way. This is to protect people from overreaching law enforcement. Having a roving warrant throws all that out of the window. It completely destroys that part of our justice system.
Well, and we saw a thing, I want to say now it's more than a year, where a guy had a GPS tracker put on his car by law enforcement, and the judge struck it down saying, you can't do that. That's just, like you said, a roving whatever. You can't just put it on there hoping to find what it is. Right.
You
tell us what you're doing wrong, and then we'll let you know if you should worry about it. And that's basically what's going on.
Yeah. It's law enforcement. There's a reason why, and it seems kind of overbearing until you've been in those situations. Either you're in law enforcement or you've dealt with law enforcement and courts and all this justice stuff. But there's a reason why there's this burden of proof placed on law enforcement that you have to be really, really, really sure in order to essentially, turn someone's life upside down. Because, getting a search warrant and then just ransacking a place because you think, well, he might be a drug dealer, but we don't really know for sure. So we're just going to ransack the place and hope we get lucky. That will destroy society's opinion of the police, of the DEA, of so many law enforcement agencies. It's not even funny. So there has to be a lot of proof or a lot of really good suspicion that you can articulate to be able to get a warrant to turn someone's life upside down. So then you can go to court with the evidence. Getting rid of that destroys faith in the justice system completely.
Well, and they do say, and then the other part was, well, they do have courts that argue this, and they're called the FISA courts. And again, we talked about that also. The problem is that no one knows anything about the FISA courts. We just know that there is a court. We know that we're not allowed to go into it. We know that it's secret, but they have they have the U.S. citizens' best interests in mind.
That's what they tell us.
And so we have to believe it without any oversight, without anything. And this is the way to get the warrants or anything else, and we're just stuck hoping that it's true.
Right. And, when you go into a normal court system, you either decide to, you can have a jury trial, right? You can have a group of everyday average U.S. citizens say whether or not you are guilty or not of a crime, or, fight on your behalf. Right? You can defend yourself. You can hire a lawyer. You can bring in a consulting firm. You can do whatever you want to try to plead your case to either say, I'm guilty or not guilty, and try to prove it to other people. The FISA courts have none of that, right? The intelligence agency goes to a FISA court. They say, yeah, we think there's some stuff over here. And the judge goes, is it for America? And the intelligence agency says for freedom. And they they give a big thumbs up. Oh. The judge takes his, green checkmark rubber stamp and slaps it on the document and says, yep, whatever you guys want, go for it. It's a rubber stamp court. I want to say they've turned down less than 5 requests from these agencies. And there's no other side to this, right? There's no one fighting on behalf of the people being surveilled or the U.S. citizens caught in the dragnet, or even, especially the people overseas who are having, transatlantic cables carrying internet spliced and, information grabbed by the NSA. There's no one fighting on the other side. So, why there's a court that just is a rubber stamp process just for the sake of being there, I don't know. It doesn't do anyone any good except give the NSA a potential way out to say, well, we're asking the courts, they're secret courts that no one can access, that you can't really defend yourself in, but it's a court.
Again, we always want to go back to, we're trying to do the short answer is we're trying to do the right thing. And the problem is we saw these Snowden leaks. We saw the abuses that are going on, and no one's saying, hey, wait a second. And it sounds like that's the issue that we're trying to stop. And I'm happy that we're at least talking about this Section 215 and the other one you said 206. But unfortunately, I have a feeling that something's going to happen in the next 2 hours. It's going to tell us that, well, we're not going to allow them to bulk surveil, take the metadata unless they get a FISA court order.
Right.
It's going to be, they're going to throw some rider in there, or unless you fully fund the National Endowment of Arts or the Teachers Pension Fund, and then everyone's say, no, we don't want to do that, and then then everything just dies.
Right. There's going to be some horrible thing that comes out of the woodwork that makes us all for naught. Yeah, we'll have to see. In any case, we cannot and we should not only rely on Congress to fight for us, right? And especially if you're outside the U.S. and you're listening to this, Congress doesn't care about you, right? For the vast majority of things, Congress just doesn't care. They care about who's lining their pocketbook, and I guess they care about the U.S. citizens that are, under their regime. But the thing we really have to look at, and the thing we need to keep doing and to increase the usage of, is encryption technologies, open source, proven method encryption, right? Because who cares if the NSA is snarfing up all the data? It's annoying, but if they can't read any of it in the next 100 years anyway, who really cares? If we're all using perfect forward secrecy encryption, I don't really care. Sure, they can collect it and they can fill their hard drives for all I care. It's annoying that my tax dollars are being used for it, but at least they're not getting anything out of it. Right? We have to support Tor. We have to support GPG. We have to support whatever is going to come next of TrueCrypt, and we've got to keep working for bigger and better crypto systems that help safeguard our privacy. This is a technology problem, and we can solve it.
Well, I do think. I mean, you're right. But I do think that we need to voice some outrage.
Oh yes. Oh, absolutely.
We're not going to get Congress to change or move quickly, but it looks like they're taking a step in the right direction where a lot of people on both sides are saying, wait a second, something is wrong.
Right.
We're just hoping that those people are louder than the really important people who are getting their pockets lined. I don't know who lines their pockets, but either way, hopefully Congress sees what's going on and says, we have to figure out a different way.
Right.
So.
The thing I want to get across is, yes, let's fight the battle in Congress, but let's not rely on them to be our bar none protectors, right? We can take it upon ourselves and we can solve these issues as people of technology, as users of technology.
So anyway, that's our show is over. I mean, we are over time. So
yep.
We will tell you how this turns out, hopefully before the next show. And we will see you next week.
See you guys.
Bye.